Filming for the 5th season of The Chosen has come to an end. This season will feature some of the most iconic scenes from the Bible, ranging from the triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem to the Last Supper, and from the cleansing of the temple to the agony of the cross. In the 5th season of the Garden of Gethsemane, let's take a peek at what Holy Week looks like. Despite the fact that the transfiguration of Jesus occurs before the raising of Lazarus in the Gospels, the previous season did not include that major storyline. It seems that Dallas Jenkins is not planning on showing the transfiguration on the screen. This is despite the fact that it is considered to be one of the most significant miracles that Jesus performed. When asked about whether he would include the transfiguration in season 4, Dallas responded that people keep saying that the transfiguration would be an important scene, and I'm confused as to what purpose would it serve our story well. It is evident that Dallas believes that the transfiguration does not have a place in The Chosen. In an interview, he confirmed this once more, saying that he has no plans for the transfiguration, which means that season 5 will not include the big moment. However, there is no need to be concerned about this. In the 5th season, the show stays true to the Bible by beginning with the last week of Jesus' life and depicting the intensity of his passion. When Jesus arrives in Jerusalem on a donkey, he is hailed by a mob that is filled with delight and eagerly welcomes him into the city. According to the Gospel of Matthew, a great number of individuals stretched their cloaks out on the road, while others took branches from the trees and placed them on the route. Praise was shouted by the throng that trailed behind Jesus and those that went ahead of him. They exclaimed, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Whoever comes in the name of the Lord is blessed, for they are welcome. All praise and glory to the highest heaven." This momentous occurrence took place while the filming of Holy Week was taking place. The cast and crew were joined by a big number of extras, which resulted in a scene that was quite emotional as they shouted with pleasure together. The level of rage that we will see is going to be unprecedented. Wow, there is a behind-the-scenes film that shows Jonathan acting out the role of Jesus while in the midst of the bustling market and the temple. As he observes the evil that has taken hold of the holy grounds, the sadness and disillusionment that can be seen in his eyes are apparent. The drama that is about to take place, in which Jesus confronts this injustice, offers the potential to be extremely powerful. Jesus enters the temple with courage and immediately begins to take action, which includes driving out the merchants and turning over the tables of the money changers. He tells them in a severe manner that the temple ought to be known as a place of worship and not as a safe haven for criminals. Additionally, the selected cast and crew videotaped the time where Jesus curses the phony tree for not growing any fruit. Behind-the-scenes footage reveals that Jesus is experiencing a great deal of emotion at this point. Aldiah State and John make an attempt to console him by giving him a kiss on the head, which is, of course, a beautiful but painful moment during the situation. Caiaphas and the other religious leaders are infuriated by the spectacular arrival of Jesus into the city as well as the cleansing of the temple. In order for this to take place, it was necessary for some individuals to persuade Pilate that Jesus posed a substantial threat. During the 5th season of filming, there were multiple instances in which Pilate, Herod, and Caiaphas discussed Jesus and developed strategies. In the course of their scheme to arrest and finally kill Jesus, you may anticipate seeing a number of sequences featuring these individuals. Additionally, there is a noteworthy occurrence in which Jude engages in conversation with religious authorities, which serves as an indication that his cooperation with them will be portrayed as a key scene. As a further development, Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, contacts the chief priests and makes a pact with them to betray Jesus. They present him with 30 pieces of silver, and from that moment forward, Judas waits for an opportunity to pass over Jesus to the authorities. It is toward the end of the season that this opportunity presents itself. In addition, Jesus imparts his wisdom to the multitudes that gathered in Jerusalem by talking about a few well-known parables. The apostles reenact the stories like actors. This was a very long shoot for the chosen actors because the script was over 16 pages long, and the majority of the lines belonged to Jonathan because he was talking in parables. Additionally, a portion of this scene included religious leaders coming and having a disagreement with Jesus' words, which will cause Jesus' authority to be called into question, and Jesus will, in turn, criticize the hypocrisy of the religious leaders. It appears that a very lengthy and fascinating drama is on its way, but it must come to an end with Jesus being compelled to depart as the danger grows closer, of course. The cast and crew filmed that night in order to accurately portray Jesus on his final night before the crucifixion. A U-shaped table was created for the Last Supper, which will be one of the most important episodes of the 5th season. The episode will be aired for 2 weeks. Jesus was seated at the center, with his most cherished disciple John on his right and the betrayer Judas on his left, although the table may not be historically precise. I assume this particular setting greatly facilitated the filming process for the days when they shot the scene where Jesus reveals that one of his followers will betray him, the moment when Jesus washes the feet of his apostles, and of course, the farewell discourse where Jesus bids farewell to his apostles, informs them of what will occur, and offers praise for them. Jonathan Rumi has confirmed that the scene in the garden was also filmed, revealing that Season 5 will conclude with Jesus' arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane. In the 5th season, there is a scene in which Judas enters the garden with the betrayed religious leaders and Roman soldiers. Dallas prefers to keep this happening a secret. His readiness to hand Jesus over to the authorities is complete. There is a great throng that is waiting for Judas, and they are armed with swords and clubs. They are the leading priests and the elders of the nation. The traitor presents them with a sign that makes it appear as though Jesus instructed them to do what you are here to do. They then put their hands on Jesus and take him into custody. The identity of the individual is purposefully concealed by Dallas, but Jonathan's voice is heard and inquires as to whether or not it is Jesus. The scene in which they sit alone and have a conversation interests Dallas, but Jonathan's thoughts are also interested about what is going on in that scene. Feel free to share your opinions in the comments. Many of you may be eagerly anticipating the release of Season 5, but unfortunately, there is no official information available at the moment. However, based on estimates, it is expected to be released sometime in February or March 2025. The Chosen Season 3 Episode 1 and Episode 2 Recap, Review, and Analysis. It is recommended that you consider Episodes 1 and 2 of The Chosen Season 3 to be a single and cohesive unit. I can't believe that the experience of seeing them separately would be as fulfilling as viewing them together, despite the fact that each of them has their own unique storyline arcs. Consequently, rather of attempting to differentiate between the two occurrences in a discrete manner, I will discuss both of them simultaneously. Some of the episodes of The Chosen have been critiqued by me for attempting to achieve too much and for having a fragmented atmosphere. The fact that they were able to cover a lot of ground, while still retaining a feeling of unity, focus, and energy is one of the things that truly impressed me about the first 2 episodes of the 3rd season. Over the course of these 2 episodes, practically every single one of the core disciples, that is, the 12 plus the women, receives a valuable experience. We also get meaningful moments for the family members of many disciples, such as Eben, Zebedee, and Matthew's parents. These moments set the stage for a plot that involves Yosef, the Pharisee that Shmuel used to hang out with in Capernaum. Additionally, we get a decent amount of time with Gaius, Atticus, and Quintus, and we get time with John the Baptist while he is in jail, along with a new character named Jonah. There is a lot of it, yet everything fits together without any problems. First and foremost, the first and second episodes of The Chosen established a distinct path for the course that the 3rd season of the show will take, as well as the conflicts that will follow. Due to the fact that each episode's action was concentrated, it was possible for episodes 1 and 2 to cover a significant amount of ground without appearing to be disconnected from one another. We have a multitude of different character arcs, but they are all investigating the same basic premise. What does it look like to come home after joining Jesus in his first mission and witnessing his teaching in the Sermon on the Mount? This is the question that is explored in the first episode, which is quite appropriately titled Homecoming. Some of the homecoming arcs are brought to a close in Episode 2, which also focuses on Jesus' commissioning of the 12 apostles and preparations to disseminate his teaching throughout Judea, while also caring for the throngs that are flocking to him. Episode 1 begins with a pre-credit prologue that is given to Matthew. We are able to understand that he is not merely an outsider who is misunderstood, which was a criticism I had in the first season. As a matter of fact, he dispatched Roman soldiers to collect from his father, Alphaeus, who provided a response that essentially stated, "You are dead to me." Matthew perceives that the teaching of Jesus regarding the necessity of making apologies with those who are angry with you, Matthew 5:21-26, has left him feeling convicted. He does not have a place to stay when he returns to Capernaum, in contrast to the other disciples who would have done so. He makes his way to his parents' house in an attempt to apologize, but his elderly dog is the one who alerts them to his own presence. It came as a complete surprise to him when he was invited into their home and referred to as son. This storyline is brought to a conclusion in episode 2, where it is revealed that Alphaeus was there at the Sermon on the Mount and was likewise arrested and sentenced to death. Matthew acknowledges that he wanted a luxurious life and to be better than others, while Alphaeus admits that it was unacceptable of him to disown his son. Both of them confess their crimes. Matthew admits that he wanted to be better than others. Both of them offer forgiveness to one another, and Matthew, who has now made amends with his parents, is invited to stay at his family home on more than one occasion. As a base of operations for the disciples, they make the decision to use his old home as a location. When Matthew is nominated to be the treasurer of the disciples, he declines the candidacy because he is deeply troubled by his history of dealing with financial matters. Judas is mesmerized by the teachings that Jesus imparts. Immediately, he informs his shady mentor from season 2 that he is withdrawing from the business in order to go to the farthest corners of the planet in order to convey the message that Jesus has to offer. His mentor makes a threat to shoe either Judas or Jesus, which is most likely a prediction of the events that will ultimately result in Judas' death. At the same time, he makes notice of the fact that Jesus needs to start a collection and become a better businessman. Judas has a meeting with Jesus and makes a request to be accepted as a disciple. He mentions that he had received some rabbinical study before to the passing of his father, and that he is able to provide financial assistance to them. Jesus explains to Judas that his credentials are irrelevant. What is important is that he is prepared to become like Jesus and undertake difficult things, as well as worship God. The name Judas derives from the Hebrew phrase, praise Yah. It is with the intention of transferring his home to his sister Devorah that Judas makes his way back to. She cautions him that following a person who claims to be the Messiah could result in his death, but Judas responds by stating that if Jesus is the Messiah, then he will not be killed. Another setup for Judas' fall. Judas has a strong desire for his life to be about something other than money, and he is confident that he can contribute to the financially stable and effective operation of Jesus' organization. After the apostles are officially commissioned in episode 2, this storyline is continued in the following episode. Judas makes an effort to present his suggestions for enhancing the financial situation, but Jesus stresses that in their first mission, they must all learn to rely on what God provides and learn to trust God for their financial needs. Judas, on the other hand, is the candidate whom Matthew proposes for the position of treasurer. Matthew, who has had a difficult history, does not trust himself with financial matters. Judas gladly accepts the offer. The three female disciples, Mary Magdalene, Rama, and Tamar, are approached by a wealthy Gentile named Jonah, Luke 8-3, that was inspired by the sermon and seeks to buy an audience with Jesus by offering a costly shawl from Nepal. Mary Magdalene, Rama, and Tamar are the three female disciples. After some time has passed, Jonah divulges the information that her husband is employed in the palace of Herod Antipas and that she is carrying a message from John the Baptist. Given that Jesus is aware that this will provide Andrew with relief from the anguish he has been experiencing with John's captivity, he grants Andrew permission to go check on John personally. Taking Jonah with him, Andrew travels to John's cell. She claims that it will be detrimental to her reputation if anybody discovers that she has been paying John visits, and as a result, she threatens to make the jailer's life even more difficult if he discloses this information to anyone. Additionally, we find out that her husband is engaging in adultery. As soon as they locate John, he is overjoyed to learn of the teaching that Jesus delivered, and he encourages Andrew to concentrate on Jesus. Andrew acknowledges that the teachings of Jesus regarding anxiety and the necessity of concentrating first on the kingdom left him feeling convicted. In light of the prophecy made by Isaiah, which states that the Anointed One will bring release from captivity and an opening of the prisons, Isaiah 61:1-4, John is certain that Jesus will finally set him free. It appears that John is certain that Jesus will confront Herod, and he suggests that the most effective way for them to assist John is to listen to what Jesus has to say. Following his successful attempt to manage his anxieties, Andrew decides to pay Mary Magdalene a visit. After coming to the realization that he had never apologized to Mary for accusing and humiliating her in the 7th episode of the 2nd season, he felt compelled to make atonement for his actions. With each other, Thomas and Rama share a number of adorable moments. Everyone is aware of the fact that they are in love with one another. Zebedee becomes a friend of Thomas, and Thomas confides in Zebedee his intention to petition Cophni to grant him permission to marry Rama. While this is going on, Mary Magdalene and Tamar inquire of Rama whether or not she is interested in marrying Thomas. Rama makes an effort to conceal her joy when she learns that Thomas intends to approach her father for his consent. The conclusion of this storyline occurs in episode 2, when Jesus sends the disciples to different areas to carry out their ministry. Intentionally, he directs Thomas in the direction of Cophni. As soon as Thomas makes his plans known to Jesus, Jesus confirms his desire and explains that once he has completed the first part of his mission, which is to convert Joppa, he will then be able to go to Cophni, evangelize Cophni, and ask Rama for her hand in marriage. Rama and Thomas have a conversation about it, and Rama makes the decision that she will go to Cophni before Thomas does, so that she can begin working on her father in order to ensure that he will have a positive reaction to Thomas. Since Emma has moved in with her brothers, Simon is looking forward to having marital intercourse with Eden when he returns home. This is especially true given that Emma has moved out. Just as they were about to take any action, Nathanael showed up at their house and informed them that he was in need of a place to stay. Eden warmly welcomes Simon inside, despite the fact that he is obviously irritated. At the same time, Simon the Zealot appears. Over the course of the story, Simon and Eden are ultimately given the opportunity to study alone, although there is no explicit content depicted on film. During the time when Simon was absent, they reflect on how difficult it was for Eden. Eden is overjoyed when Simon tells her that he is hoping that they would eventually be granted a brief break so that they can begin the process of trying to have a child. The 2nd episode continues along this same storyline. Eden suffers a great deal of devastation as Jesus dispatches the apostles. Both of them need to be supportive of one another. In the aftermath of the Sermon on the Mount, the 3 women make their way back to Mary's minuscule dwelling, which is utterly devoid of any supplies. Furthermore, they have only a small amount of money and food among themselves. Tamar is interested in selling the expensive shawl that Joanna gave them, but Rama is not interested in doing so. Rama is upset by the way wealthy people try to buy attention, something she learned during her time spent serving wine. After a brief period of idle chatter, the women discuss the means by which they will be able to provide for themselves, possibly by selling anointing oil that Zebedee has produced. Due to the personal significance of her jewelry, Tamar is not willing to sell it under any circumstances. In the process of sending out the apostles, Jesus gives them the responsibility of not only finding ways to finance the mission, but also of providing care for the pilgrims who are making their way to Capernaum in order to meet him. Big James can't wait to get home and enjoy the delicious meals that their mother has prepared for them. He is a little irritated by the fact that John and Zebedee have become friends with Thomas and have neglected to keep him informed about a number of matters. In addition to expressing his immense pride in his sons, Zebedee also shares with them that he is beginning to produce a unique olive oil. Nathanael and Simon the Zealot make the discovery in episode 2 that there is a shanty town full of pilgrims who have come to pay their respects to Jesus. Because of this, they are concerned that Rome would take a negative stance on the matter. As a result of Simon the Zealot's failure to carry out the plan to execute the Roman official in the 4th episode of the 2nd season, an assassin belonging to the Zealot faction has also arrived and has begun following him. When Simon later realizes that the assassin is following him, he is forced to climb up a structure in order to avoid being caught by him. To his astonishment, Atticus confronts him, who is aware that the Zealots are sending people to assassinate him. He is surprised by this revelation. When Simon sees Atticus again, he understands that he is the same person he was before. Atticus adds that he is alright with letting Simon walk free now that he has made the decision to give up his dagger, but that the zealots will not be so merciful and will continue to try to track Simon down. Atticus also threatens that he will have to deal with the zealots himself if they congregate in Capernaum with the intention of causing trouble. During the time that Jesus is pairing the two of them together for mission, Simon also learns for the first time that Matthew was a tax collector. Jesus makes the observation that Matthew is no longer a tax collector in the same way that Simon is a zealot any longer. In the first episode, we get to watch a substantial portion of the Sermon on the Mount, as well as the responses of each disciple to the sections of the sermon that resonated with them. During the latter portion of the second episode, Jesus calls the 12 individuals who he has chosen to be his apostles and delivers the sermon that is found in Matthew 10. He goes on to explain that they will go out and extend his ministry over the entirety of Judea by curing the sick and driving out demons, but at this time, they will only be able to do so with Jews. The disciples are a little dumbfounded by the fact that Jesus can simply bestow this power upon them, particularly considering the fact that many of them have gotten very little instruction up to this point. It is also explained by Jesus that they are to take very little with them, so that they might instead rely on God and on the assistance of other people. Despite the fact that he advises them not to be afraid of those who kill the body, which makes them even more terrified, he explains that they will eventually follow him into death, but not quite yet. In order to ensure that people are prepared to accept his authority and his teaching when he arrives, they are making preparations for the forthcoming event. Simon and Judas, Andrew and Philip, Nathanael and Thaddeus, John and Thomas, Big James and Little James, and Matthew and Simon the Zealot are the pairs that Jesus chooses to divide them into. At a later period, the disciples join back at Matthew's old house to have their final meal together, but this time without Jesus. Psalm 3 is the one that Simon leads them in praying after he has given them all a pep talk. There is only one scene involving Little James in episode 2, but it is a dramatic one. In his explanation to Jesus, he explains that he does not understand how he is being granted the power to heal others when he himself is still not healed of his own infirmity. Jesus adds that he is able to heal James at this very moment. Nevertheless, it will be an even more powerful and remarkable testimony to people if they see James praising God, despite the fact that he is still suffering from his illness. James confides in Jesus that he is experiencing feelings of being a burden and that he is the weakest among the children of God. Jesus gives him encouragement, telling him that his bodily ailments are a lot less of a burden than the spiritual ailments of other people, and that God is not impressed by what men care about. During times of weakness, James is able to uncover his inner strength. Despite the fact that it may not be until forever, Jesus gives James the assurance that he will be healed. It is important to remember that during the second season, we discovered that Yosef, despite being a Pharisee, is truly a Christ follower. It is evident that Yosef is struck by the Sermon on the Mount, as are the common people whom he overhears comparing the personal authority of Jesus to the authority that is derived from the Pharisees. In the process of writing about it, he goes back to his synagogue, where he meets Jairus, Mark 5:21-43, who has recently taken over as the new chief administrator. Given the confusion that the Jesus movement has caused, Jairus seems to be implying that he has arrived to bring order to the situation. Yosef should take anything he writes about Jesus' teaching and put it in his vault for a few days or weeks so that his mind can settle. This is essentially the don't send an emotional email response until you've let it sit for a day guideline. He proposes that Yosef should do this. Yosef is grateful for this piece of wisdom. In a letter sent to Nicodemus, he completes the writing of what he had heard from Jesus and then leaves it with Jairus with him. The two of them play the role of a buddy cop. They have a brief moment together in episode 1 following the Sermon on the Mount, during which they are both attempting to comprehend what they have just heard, particularly the message on enemies and retaliation, and they do not talk much. In the second episode, they become aware of the shanty village of pilgrims who are paying a visit to Jesus and are concerned about Quintus' attitude to the situation. In addition, Atticus gives signals that he is aware that Gaius is grappling with a problem in his personal life that he is concealing from others. It is because of the presence of sewage in the water that Quintus is in a foul temper when they go to report them. They inform Quintus about the camps, and he expresses his annoyance at the additional disruption to Roman order that this causes. First and foremost, he is upset because they have not informed him about the speech that Jesus delivered earlier. Both of them are dishonest, stating that the speech was only about Jewish traditions in order to minimize the impact of what was spoken. A proposed solution to the problem of the shantytown is presented to Quintus by Atticus. He suggests that Quintus extend the city bounds to include the shantytown and impose taxes on the pilgrims. On the other hand, Atticus cautions Quintus that he must use circumspection because the empire is looking for order rather than bloodshed. An ominous statement is made by Atticus to Quintus, stating that he would soon be returning to Jerusalem in order to meet with Pilate. In the previous sentence, it was mentioned that Atticus gives Simon the Zealot a warning about his pursuers. This action gives the impression that Atticus has some sympathy for the Jesus movement. During the course of their patrol across the camp, we also observe Gaius preventing another Roman soldier from engaging in violent behavior. He reminds the soldier to use a gentle touch when upholding the law. When Gaius encounters Matthew outside of his house, just before to the disciples gathering together, he makes a commitment to look out for the disciples' well-being and ensure their safety. The fact that he encourages Matthew to utilize his wits while he is out on mission is a strong indication that he has developed a more favorable perspective on the Jesus movement. Important ideas explored in the first and second episodes of the third season of The Chosen. Just a few of the most important ideas that are woven throughout these narratives are as follows. Belief and action are brought about by the word of Jesus. I was taken aback by the amount of the Sermon on the Mount that they incorporated all at once, but what they did was effective. The scene wasn't primarily about listening to Jesus deliver a sermon. Rather, it was about watching the disciples and other people listen to Jesus deliver a sermon. The actors did an excellent job of demonstrating how they were mentally processing what they had heard and how they were feeling conviction through the use of non-verbal communication. The majority of the action in episode 1 is then driven by the need to respond to the conviction that was brought about by the words of Jesus. In particular, his words about the need to reconcile Matthew with his parents, Andrew with Mary, and the need to not worry, Andrew's worry about John, the women's worry about money, Eden's worry about Simon, and the need to not focus on money, Judas, Matthew, Tamar, are the most important. The program did a fantastic job of conveying the experience of conviction in a way that seemed genuine and was not cheesy, which is how it typically seems in the majority of Christian films. When the show was in its first season, I made the accusation that it placed an excessive amount of emphasis on the Jesus loves outsiders dynamic to the detriment of Jesus dealing with sin. This episode more than made up for the previous one. In retrospect, there is a logic to it. When God first pursues us, his primary focus is typically on demonstrating his love for us and inviting us to enter his presence. However, as we grow closer to Jesus, he will eventually begin to shed more light on the aspects of our life that require modification. In addition, I adored the comment that John the Baptist made about how whenever Jesus talks, there is typically something in it for each and every one of us. This is such an accurate description of how sermons function. Jesus is the one who brings redemption. They were all incredibly well done, but the sequences of reconciliation between Matthew and his family, between Andrew and Mary, and between Matthew and Gaius were particularly impressive. In addition to being emotionally charged, they also have a realistic clumsiness and a certain degree of complexity, which I believe was the aspect that I loved the most. Jesus has a unique plan for each and every one of us. Despite the challenges they have encountered in their lives, and frequently as a result of those challenges, Judas, Matthew, and little James all come to the awareness that they have been molded in distinctive ways to carry out the purpose that Jesus has given them. Although Jesus does not require us, he desires to make use of us. This realization is brought to light when Jesus commissions the apostles and gives them authority and power over healing and demons, despite the fact that they believe they are not capable of doing them justice. In addition, I believe that the contrast between Judas and Matthew brings this concept to the forefront in an innovative and intriguing manner. The fact that Judas' first action is to hand over to Jesus a list of all he has to offer, as well as the fact that he seems a little too enthusiastic to be nominated treasurer, is a warning flag. Judas is incapable of detecting the temptation that money presents. Matthew, on the other hand, certainly would not have imagined of asking to follow Jesus, and when he is nominated for treasurer, he declines the nomination, despite the fact that he is capable of doing so. Matthew is aware that avoiding temptation is more essential than displaying his skills. It is possible that Judas's idea that Jesus requires him may cause him to follow his own plans, rather than following the plan that Jesus came up with, that is, trusting God. Jesus' plan is paradoxical, and it is difficult to put one's faith in it. The paradoxical nature of Jesus' will and mission is something that a number of individuals grapple with throughout the story. Little James struggles because Jesus has not cured him. Andrew struggles when he sees John in jail. Simon and Eden struggle when their plan to start a family is almost immediately disturbed. Thomas struggles when it initially appears that his plan to seek Rama in marriage would get disrupted, and little James struggles because Jesus has not healed him. Jesus provides some degree of relief in a number of situations. For example, he sends Andrew to John in order to reassure him. He has a conversation with little James, and he ultimately sends Thomas in the direction of Caiaphas. Of course, not everything has a happy ending. However, they are commended to follow Jesus and pursue the kingdom first, with the faith that God will provide for everything else. Simon and Eden are not given an easy way out of their situation. Following Jesus will need you to endure pain in the long run. During the first 2 episodes of the 3rd season of The Chosen, the disciples do not face any persecution, yet Jesus makes it very obvious that they will undergo suffering in the future. Jesus' movement causes chaos and disarray. The show did an excellent job at recasting the characters that were originally Roman. Throughout the first season, Quintus occasionally had a cartoonishly nasty feeling about him. Season 3 sheds a lot more light on his reasons for doing things. Although he is still a self-centered narcissist, he also has a little bit of insecurity. In order to appease those in authority over him, he is under a lot of pressure to provide the impression that everything is in order. At the beginning of the story, Atticus and Gaius are successful in locating a peaceful method of responding to the chaos that was caused by the Jesus movement, which is the shantytown. At some point, however, it will become abundantly evident that the disturbance brought about by the movement will eventually become unbearable to ignore or suppress, and the Romans will feel justified in employing more severe measures. In addition, Yusuf's story draws attention to this particular theme. Jairus has arrived to bring order to the religious realm, and he begins by doing it in a calm manner by only warning Yusuf not to publish anything about Jesus without first giving it some serious thought. While that is all well and well, the appropriate response to Jesus is not always to just sit back and relax. Rather, it is to take action in response to the conviction that you have developed. My guess is that we will see Yusuf going through a difficult time, and in the end, we will see Jairus giving up on his quest of order when he truly wants his daughter to be healed. The Chosen Season 3 Episode 1 Discussion Questions: The Sermon on the Mount. Throughout the course of the 2nd season of The Chosen, we watch as Jesus and his disciples get ready to deliver the Sermon on the Mount. However, the 8th episode of the 2nd season ends just before Jesus begins to deliver his sermon. According to the promos for the 3rd season of The Chosen, it seems like we will be exposed to large chunks of the teachings that Jesus imparted. My guess is that we will not receive a single extended cut of the entire sermon. Rather, we will be shown flashbacks to the sermon that are intercut with events that take place after the sermon. You can have a conversation with your family, friends, or group about the things that are contained in the Sermon on the Mount. It is possible that a comprehensive Bible study and conversation may easily take up a whole semester's worth of time. If you want to dovetail with the themes of The Chosen Season 3, however, I would suggest focusing your time on only 2 passages: the teachings of Jesus on vengeance and enemies, Matthew 5:38-48, and the teachings of Jesus on concern, Matthew 6:24-34. Discourse concerning retaliation and opponents. There are a number of observations I'd like to make before we start our conversation. It was soon before Jesus began his famous Sermon on the Mount that the 2nd season of The Chosen came to an end. It is possible that we will not be able to hear the complete speech in Season 3, but we will most likely be able to listen to significant sections. It is likely that the show will make use of the sermon in order to emphasize the most important lessons that the disciples need to learn in order to truly follow Jesus and spread his message. It is expected that the adversaries of Jesus would start making life significantly more challenging for the disciples and their families during the third season of The Chosen. The message that Jesus gave in the Sermon on the Mount is one of the most well-known teachings ever given. It is about how we should respond to our adversaries when they insult and hurt us. Request that someone read the passage to you now. You are aware of the proverb that states, "A tooth for a tooth and an eye for an eye," and you have heard it. To you, however, I say, do not put up a fight against the one who is bad. On the other hand, if someone hits you on the right cheek, you should turn to him both cheeks. Additionally, if someone were to shoo you and take your tunic, you should allow him to take your cloak as well. If someone compels you to walk 1 mile, you should accompany them for a total of 2 miles. You should give to the person who is begging you, and you should not refuse the person who is asking you to lend them money. The proverb, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy," is something that you have probably heard before. However, I tell you to love your adversaries and to pray for those who are persecuting you, so that you may experience the privilege of being sons of your heavenly Father. He causes his sun to rise on those who are bad and on those who are good, and he sends rain on those who are just and on those who are unjust. When you love those that love you, what kind of recompense do you receive in return? Aren't even the people who collect taxes doing the same thing? And if you simply greet your brothers, what are you doing that gives you an advantage over other people? Does not even the Gentiles behave in the same manner? Therefore, due to the fact that your heavenly Father is flawless, you must also be perfect. Extract from Matthew 5:38-48. After you have finished reading, have your group ask, in what ways does Jesus encourage us to respond to those who are our adversaries and all those who cause us pain? People who hold political opinions that are different from our own are often portrayed as our adversaries in the culture that we currently embrace. How come it is so challenging to apply this concept to the realm of politics? What kinds of responses are we tempted to give to those who oppose us politically? Why is it that Jesus wants us to love those who hurt us? An examination of worry. For the purpose of continuing our discussion, I would like to make a few further observations. Whenever our adversaries make our lives more challenging, we may feel the want to exact revenge on them. During the course of the third season of The Chosen, we will witness the disciples of Jesus battling with the same temptation. There is yet more temptation that we are confronted with when life becomes challenging. We strive to take control, and when we are unable to do so, we are tempted to worry about the situation. During the third season of The Chosen, many of Jesus' disciples will experience a sense of losing control of their lives, and they will be tempted to worry about it. In order to alleviate their concerns, Jesus instructs his disciples to take a different path. Request that someone read the passage to you now. It is impossible for a person to serve 2 masters because either he will despise the first master and adore the second master, or he will be loyal to the first master and despise the second master. It is impossible to serve God and money at the same time. I want to inform you that you should not be concerned about your life, what you will consume, or what you will drink, nor should you be concerned about your body or what you will put on. If food is more important than life, then the body is more important than clothing. You should take a look at the birds of the air. They do not plant seeds, harvest crops, or collect into barns, but your heavenly Father nevertheless provides for their needs. Compared to them, do you not possess a higher value? And which of you, out of all of you, can add 1 hour to his total lifespan simply by being anxious? And what is it about clothing that makes you so anxious? When you think about the lilies of the field and how they grow, you will notice that they do not require any labor or spin. However, I can assure you that even Solomon, in all of his glory, was not dressed like one of these. However, if God is able to clothe the grass of the field in such a manner, something that is alive today and will be thrown into the oven tomorrow, then will he not also clothe you, you who have a lack of faith? In light of this, you should not be apprehensive and ask questions such as, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? This is because the Gentiles are interested in all of these things, and your heavenly Father is aware that you require all of them together. But make it your first priority to seek the kingdom of God and the righteousness that he has for you, and everything else will be added to you. In light of this, you should not be concerned about tomorrow, because tomorrow will be concerned about itself instead. Sufficient for the day is more than enough for the day. Extract from Matthew 6:24-34. After you have finished reading, have your group ask, what are some of the things that would cause you to feel anxious or concerned? Why should we be concerned? According to Jesus, what are some of the reasons that we should not be alarmed? Is it necessary for us to feel guilty if we often find ourselves suffering with feelings of worry and anxiety? During times of anxiety, what are some useful ways that we might respond to the situation? The commissioning of the 12 is this week's discussion topic for the first episode of The Chosen Season 3. You can continue your conversation by bringing up the following points. Because they are going to be taking a more active role in the mission of Jesus, the disciples are going to experience more opposition. This is one of the reasons why they will confront increased opposition. We saw the disciples starting to take a more active role in ministry by the time the second season of The Chosen came to a close. They were responsible for planning the Sermon on the Mount. Within the context of ministry, the disciples will take on an even more crucial role in the third season of The Chosen. It is not enough for the disciples to just bring people to Jesus. They will also deliver the message of Jesus to areas that Jesus has not yet visited. While they are on their mission, Jesus provides his disciples with extraordinary wisdom to help them overcome the problems they will encounter. Request that someone read the passage to you now. Look, I am sending you out into the world like sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore, you must be as smart as serpents and as pure as doves. Be wary of men, for they will bring you before their courts and flogging you in their synagogues. They will also drag you before governors and kings for my sake, so that you might testify in front of them and the Gentiles. Do not be nervous about how you are going to speak or what you are going to say when they deliver you over, because the information that you are supposed to convey will be provided to you inside that hour. You are not the one who is speaking, rather, it is the Spirit of your Father who is speaking through you. You will be reviled by everyone for the sake of my name, and brother will be the one to turn brother over to death. The father will be the one to deliver his child, and children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. But those who are able to persevere until the very end will be spared. Exegesis of Matthew 10:16-22. After you have finished reading, have your group ask, what kinds of risks do we take on when we embark on a missionary journey to spread the message that Jesus has given us? What kind of response does Jesus expect us to give to those who disagree with his message? What kind of a promise does Jesus make to us that will build us up and encourage us? Discussion questions for the first episode of Season 3 of The Chosen concerning the Aaronic blessing, the final stretch. To kick off the last part of the talk, you should mention the following. More than only wisdom, Jesus provides us with the ability to confront the challenge of adversity. Additionally, he bestows upon us the favor and presence of God, which is a blessing. During the time of the ancient Israelites, God gave Moses a distinctive prayer in order to expand his favor and presence. The priests of Israel have been using this prayer for hundreds of years in order to bless the Israelites. Request that someone read the passage to you now. The Lord spoke to Moses and said, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, Thus you shall bless the people of Israel. You shall say to them, The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace." Moses was instructed to speak to Aaron and his sons. In this manner, they will affix my name to the people of Israel, and I will bless them. Exegesis of Numbers 6:22-27. After you have finished reading, have your group ask, have you ever thought about what the face of God looks like when he sees you? According to your understanding, what does it look like for God to bless us and be kind to us even when we are confronted with opposition? Are you now experiencing any specific circumstances in your life that make you feel as though you require the grace and blessing of God?